One of the new novels in Oprah Winfrey's book club is gaining high praise. Behold the Dreamers by Imbolo Mbue is an exploration of marriage, immigration, and the American dream. The story is about a young couple from Cameroon starting a new life in New York City during the recession. CBS This Morning's Gayle King sat down with Mbue to talk about her debut novel in a Facebook Live interview.
Hello, CBSN and Facebook Live. One of us sitting before you is a best-selling author. Now, I'm Gayle King, and you are?
Imbolo Mbue.
So that would make you the best-selling author. Imbolo, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Gayle.
We are very excited that you're here because, listen, Oprah's book club, she announced it on CBS This Morning 2 weeks ago, and her pick was?
Behold the Dreamers.
Behold the Dreamers by?
Imbolo Mbue.
Imbolo Mbue. Listen, I've been practicing her name, and she keeps saying, no, Gayle, you're saying it wrong. You're saying it wrong. So, Imbolo.
That is right.
Imbolo. Isn't it?
Yes.
No, at one point she went, okay, whatever. I don't want to mess up your name.
No, you got it right.
Okay,
Imbolo. Right.
Okay, but this is what I think is so exciting. Oprah has this tradition of always calling the author to let them know that they are the book club selection. And after she called you, she said it was one of the best author calls that she's ever had.
Wow.
She was so excited after talking to you. So let's set the scenario. You think you're getting a call from the Oprah magazine.
That's right.
To tell you what?
Right. So Lee Haber, the book editor.
Who's our book editor, yeah.
She emails me and says, I want you to do a review for O Magazine, the book review. And I said, okay. And then she said, let's talk on Friday and save 3 hours to talk about the book review.
Save 3 hours?
Exactly. And I thought, well, what kind of book review do we need to talk about for 3 hours? So I got suspicious, but I didn't really allow myself to think much about it. I thought it might be you. I thought it might be something to do for the magazine, maybe write a really big essay or something.
Well, note to self to tell Lee, never tell anybody. Nobody wants to give 3 hours for nothing, for anything.
But I saved 3 hours. I spent 3 hours waiting by my phone, looking at my phone like this for 3 hours.
Oh my
And
God.
finally, at probably 2:45, she told me to wait for the call at noon, so between noon and 3.
Oh my
So
God.
from noon to 2:45, I sat by my phone looking at it.
Oh my God.
And finally, around 2:45, I get a call, and she says, "Hi, Imbolo, it's Oprah Winfrey."
Oh man.
And I said, I thought it would be Lee. She said, no, it's me, it's Oprah.
Wow. And you thought what?
I think I was more speechless. You know, it was one of those moments where, because she sounds exactly like Oprah.
Yes,
you know?
yes, she does.
So you think it is Oprah calling me on my phone.
Wow.
She went straight. She just told me immediately. She said, "I'm calling to tell you that I selected your book for the Oprah, for my book club."
Oh, wow.
And I totally lost it. I mean, I was crying probably for most of the time.
Were you crying?
Yeah, because I was so overwhelmed, and not only because Oprah calling me, but because my writing career had so much to do with Oprah. Recommending a book that influenced me to become, to start writing.
That's what I think, Imbolo, is so great about this story. Because here you are, you come to this country at 17, from Cameroon. We'll get to that in a second. But at 21, you're watching the Oprah show, and she picks a book that you thought, what was the book?
No, she'd already picked the book before I discovered it. I walked into a library in Falls Church, Virginia, and there was a shelf that had Oprah Book Club picks, just Oprah Book Club picks.
Okay.
She'd already picked this book years before, I think. And
Yes,
when I walked in, this is 2002, I walked into this library, there's this shelf, and it had all these Oprah Book Club picks, and I thought to myself, I'm going to try one of it. I'd never tried any of the Oprah Book Club picks.
Okay.
I knew of the book club because I was a big fan of Oprah, the show.
So you just happened to pick which book?
I just happened to pick Song of Solomon.
Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison.
By Toni Morrison, that's right.
Because it was an Oprah Book Club pick.
Right, because I saw it there and it caught my eye, because I never read Toni Morrison. I didn't know much about her work, but I thought Song of Solomon, what a great title.
Yes.
So I said, let me try this book.
So you read the book, and it did what for you or to you?
And
you liked it?
I thought, and I said this to the magazine, I thought if God were a writer, this is what he would write. This is how he would write. I just thought, Toni Morrison was probably just this wonderful, gifted writer. And I was so blown away. I remember staying up at night thinking about this book and thinking, what is it like to write a book? I mean, what is it like to write a powerful book?
And then it began, did you think maybe I could do that?
I just started writing. I didn't think about it. I didn't think that I want to publish a book. I didn't think that I didn't think about what I wanted to write. I just wanted to write a story to experience what it's like
That
to
was
write.
as powerful as that.
Right.
You know what I love so much about your story? Because on page 195, the character in the book, Nenny, nodded on the sofa without taking her eyes off her Oprah magazine.
That's right.
So the character in the book is reading Oprah magazine.
Right.
And then, enter please, Patty. This is Patty. Here is the author with Oprah in the Oprah magazine.
Yes.
I think that is so cool.
Yeah,
I mean, so you wrote that long before, and listen, this is our cover, this is the July cover.
That's right.
And we had shot this, and Oprah said, I want to be holding Behold the Dreamers
Right.
in July. So we changed the book.
Right.
So not only you're on the cover of Oprah magazine, but then here you are with Oprah in the Oprah magazine.
It's very
And your
generous.
character is reading the Oprah magazine.
Right.
That is so cool.
I never even thought at any moment while writing this book that Oprah would ever read it. I just
Yes.
never, I mean, why would I think, I mean, Oprah reads a lot of books, but why would I think she would read mine?
No.
It never, ever crossed my mind that she even noticed it. But I love telling the story of how I became a writer because I wanted to tell people about my journey as a writer.
Yes.
And how, you know, somebody recommending a book, how much it ended up changing my life.
Yes.
But people said to me, like, wow, what a great story. And I said, yeah, but there's so many people whose lives were changed by Oprah because she said something or did something and they changed careers or lost weight or did something. So I thought my story is just one of thousands of stories about people who did something because of Oprah.
And I bet people would say, you should tell Oprah this story. And you
Right.
think, how am I going to tell Oprah my story?
And Oprah hears probably lots of stories all the time. I didn't think mine was that remarkable that, you know, I needed to tell her.
Yeah.
But when she called me, I said, I have to tell you this story.
know.
And
I
she'd
do
never
think
heard the
it's amazing.
story.
No, she hadn't.
She
No.
said, what? I never heard this story.
Nope. Nope. She called me and said, you were not going to believe what just happened to me. I just talked to the author, and she told me that because she'd read blah, blah, the story that you
Right.
just told. So I think it's sort of a full circle
Right.
goosebump,
Right.
meant to be moment
Right.
that here we sit here
Right.
On this date in 2017, and
Right.
you are her book club selection. So you came to this country from Cameroon at the age of 17. What did you think America was going to be? Why did you want to come here, and what did you think America was going to be like?
Well, I came here to go to college. I had relatives who, you know, sponsored me to come here, and I went to college. But before coming here, I did not have a very accurate picture of America. I think a lot of it was based on what I'd seen on TV.
What was that?
You know, Beverly Hills, you know,
Yeah.
shows like that. You know, shows like Cosby Show. I mean, America seemed to be this wonderful place. People were wealthy and healthy and happy. I didn't see a lot of the, you know, the not so wonderful parts of America on Cameroonian TV.
Because it does have it is wealthy and wonderful, but there is another side.
Yeah,
as well.
and that is the side I did not see much. And also, the immigrants who went to America and they came back home, they did not exactly tell us that we don't have this easy life in America. I think there's a lot of pressure to put up this facade of success. So when you come back home to visit, you don't say, you know, I'm struggling, I'm working 4 jobs. You say, oh, I'm doing well, and you come back with a lot of money. And I did the same thing too. When I went back home, I had to borrow money to buy my ticket to go back home, but I didn't tell anybody that.
You didn't tell anybody how hard it was.
No, because you come to this country to become successful, and to fail at it is quite shameful.
Yeah.
And so when I came here, I was surprised to see homelessness. You know, I'd never heard of racism. It was just all very new to me that, you know, that there was just a lot of, you know, social issues in this country.
So you're surprised to see homelessness and racism in America when you're used to seeing Beverly Hills and the Cosby Show. So,
and it probably was very naive on my part, but I was young and I was influenced a lot by the media. And even the books I read, they did not, you know, project any kind of image that America was in this promised land of sorts.
Yeah, that there's another side.
Right.
So you get the idea for Behold the Dreamers. This is what's so interesting because you have the two worlds intersecting. So you're here in New York City. You go to college. Where did you go to college?
I went to college at Rutgers in New Jersey.
So in New Jersey.
And then I moved to New York to go to Columbia.
At Rutgers. Okay. So you're in the city. You're walking out of a Columbus Circle, and you see what that sparks an idea for you.
I see chauffeurs waiting in front of the Time Warner building, which is right at Columbus Circle.
Right.
And I saw these chauffeurs waiting, a good number of chauffeurs, and I also saw the men that they drove, they seemed like executives.
Yes.
And I thought, what is the relationship like between these chauffeurs and the men they drive?
Yeah.
And that was what sparked the idea.
So you have a wealthy white man.
That's right.
Who's very successful, working in the financial industry. And the other character, Jende, is an African immigrant who happens to come from your town.
That's right, my hometown of Limbe.
Imagine that, he comes from Limbe.
Yes.
Okay, so he gets this job, and then you start thinking, what's the relationship between the two of them, or what was your thought there?
Well, my first thought was about the financial crisis, because I had lost my job at this point. I'd lost my job. I was working for a media company in marketing, and I lost my job. So I was thinking, how did the financial crisis affect other people in New York City? Because I had lost my job, a year after Lehman Brothers collapsed. And I thought, how did this chauffeur, how did Lehman Brothers collapse affect him? And this executive, what if he worked at Lehman Brothers? What was it like for him working at Lehman Brothers? And how did the dreams they had for themselves and their children, how were the dreams affected by the financial crisis? So it was very much about the financial crisis.
Yeah, because if the financial crisis affects the executives, it would certainly affect the people that work for them.
But in different ways. And I wanted to, explore those different ways. And also their families, their wives and their children, and the people who work for them in different, like the secretary for the executive,
Leah, there's a character, Leah, who's a secretary.
Right. So it started off being mostly about the financial crisis, but because Jende is an immigrant, I also wanted to explore coming to this country and having such high hopes, the way I had high hopes for America.
When you came.
Right, when I came, and then the financial crisis happens, and you start questioning.
But then you wondered about the relationship between the two of them because they spend a lot of time in the car together. So were you thinking, what do they talk about, or do they talk?
Right. I thought about that a lot because I said, they're very different. They couldn't be any more different. Very different worlds, and I wanted to, because class is an issue which I grew up around. So I didn't grow up around race, but I grew up in a very class-conscious society, and two men like that, a man and a chauffeur, there will be very little relationship between them because of the class. But in America, I thought, somebody like Clark, what if we were more friendly? What if we were more open-minded? And how would Jende treat
Clark is a successful executive.
Right.
Jende is his driver.
Right. Clark is the Lehman Brothers executive.
Yes.
So I started writing, their dialogue, when Jende goes for a job interview, which is where the book starts, when Jende goes for a job interview.
And how nervous he is
to get the job. Right.
And we can say, without giving anything away, he does get the job.
He does get the job,
so
yes.
Clark is married to Cindy, Jendy's married to Nene, and they each have children. So along the way, there's a story. Listen, you even touch on opioid addiction. We won't say who has the opioid addiction and how that turns out for them. But I thought it was so interesting and timely that you even touched on that. What made you think about that, opioid addiction?
Well, I think I'd worked in a mental health clinic, and I'd worked with substance abusers, and I was always very affected by, how much addiction changed people's lives and how it affected them and their families. So I thought about these characters having struggles, and one of them being an addiction, and how the amount of shame that came with that, and how another character might try to manipulate that situation for their own advantage.
Yes, so that's another storyline about the character's opioid addiction. And there's also storylines about the marriage between the two couples, how they're each dealing with their own issues in their individual marriages. But what struck me is there are a couple of times in the book where people do things that are totally out of character. And so I found myself gasping like, well, he would never do that, she would never do that. And to that you say what?
Well, I say that, yes, we do have, our character, which we mostly live by that, but we do things out of character. At least I know that I've done things out of character.
What have you done that's out of character? Tell me.
Oh, Gayle, you know.
I want to know.
I don't know. Okay, I'll tell you a story many years ago, which this is totally out of character for me. But one time I was driving to work and I was running late, and I was very, very nervous about going late to work and maybe losing my job. And it was Christmas time, and the garage was very full, and somebody had a parking spot we were about to move into. And I swerved and cut in front of it.
And you took the parking spot?
I took the spot. That was very out of character for me.
Oh my God.
Exactly. But I needed to get to work ASAP.
But they needed to get to work too.
But, I mean, everybody in the parking lot was like, what? We'll kill you. We'll slash your tire.
Did you get out of your car and walk away?
I walked, and they were all like honking and giving me the finger. Yes. But it was, even now I'm thinking, I can't believe I did that.
Now did you feel badly about that?
I did, because the guy was, I mean, maybe he had somewhere important to be also, and he was all ready. You know, I mean, he was right there, and I just went around and went.
So you said that's out of character for you, but you said desperate people do different things.
Yes, and that is my example.
Did you get your tire slashed?
No, but I spent the whole day at work very nervous.
No. It's so funny you should talk about a car, because once I was on the highway driving, and my kids are in the back. They were younger, and somebody cut me off.
Right.
And I sped up to catch them. And I pulled beside them, I'm hung on. I mean, like
that is out of character.
Oh, it wasn't. But this is the thing. And the kids are going, Mom, stop, which is really bad. Your own children,
Right.
Mom, stop. And I'm, no. And the lady looked at me and she went, sorry. And all I could do was going, that's okay. And then I felt like an idiot that I'd made such a big thing out of something that really is so stupid.
Yeah.
And then I realized she hadn't even intended to cut me off, but she did.
Right.
And I went from 0 to 80.
Right.
And even with the kids in the background going, Mom, stop, because I'm honking, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So that's out of character.
Yes, it is.
That's
And
just
I
wrong.
wasn't, exactly, and I wasn't proud of it. I am not proud of it.
Yes,
And
I'm not proud of you.
wherever that guy is, I am sorry. I shouldn't have taken your parking spot.
But so your point is, when people are desperate
Yes.
or in a bind, sometimes
Yes.
they will do things that are out of character. And
Yes.
that happens a couple of times in this book.
Yes.
The other thing I love your writing.
Thank you.
Number one, let's go to 237. You said, a man, this is, can I say who the couple is or no? The line says, the man who promised to take care of her was standing above her, vomiting a parade of insults. Wow. Can I say which couple
you
that
can
is?
say.
Okay, so this is the driver talking to his wife.
Yes.
And they have a little tiff.
Yes.
But the man who promised to take care of her was standing above her, vomiting a parade of insults. Where does that come from?
Thank you. Well, that is actually, a point in their marriage where it's very tense time in their marriage. Because in the beginning of the story, they're very happy couple.
Very happy, yes.
They don't have a lot.
And it takes a turn.
Yeah, they don't have a lot, but they have to confront the harsh realities of being a working class immigrant in America.
But it's so visual, though, because anybody who's been in a marriage has had a moment with their spouse, I would imagine, where you're just pissed at each other.
Right.
And you're thinking, but we're supposed to love each other. Why are we talking to each other this way?
Yeah.
So I thought I love that writing. And then 27, you said he was trying to say, okay, scattering all questions all over him like confetti on a victorious warrior.
Yeah, this is doing happier times.
Yes, happier times. But she was so excited, and I can see as a wife that you're asking so many questions at the same time. But the way you said, scattering questions all over him like confetti on a victorious warrior. Wow.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that from?
I think it just comes, I think it's
You're very visual.
Yeah, I think, what it is, I think when I write, I see things very clearly. I think that is what
Very clearly.
is. Yes, I just see
Very
it, and then I
clearly.
just write it as I see it. But I don't know how to explain it.
No, but I thought that was beautifully said. Now, this is your first book. How old are you, can we say?
Me, 36.
Yes, you. So 36. This is your first book that you've ever written, and the first time you get it published. How does someone who has had no writing experience really even get a book published for the first time? Which, by the way, could I mention while we're talking to Imbolo Mbue?
Yes.
It's not
You got it.
She's humoring me now. Behold the Dreamer. Instantly after it was announced, became a New York Times bestseller.
That's right.
So how does that happen that it becomes, how does it happen that somebody with really no connections, who doesn't have, who's never written before, get this published? Did you have an agent? Did you have a friend? Did you know somebody? What happened?
I knew nobody in the publishing world.
Yes.
I knew nobody. It just took a lot of emails to agents.
Did you get a lot of rejection?
A lot of, oh my God, it must have been, I don't know, maybe hundreds. I got it.
How long did it take you?
About 3 years.
3 years?
Yes. So I had spent 9 years writing before I started writing this book, because after I read Song of Solomon, I started writing another story, but it's still sitting in my computer.
Okay.
And then I decided to start writing this one when I got the inspiration. And I started emailing agents, and I emailed lots of agents telling them, I have this story about this African immigrant and the Lehman Brothers executive. Are you interested?
No.
And exactly. And a lot of their rejection was because the story just needed me to keep on working on it.
Yeah.
They said, you have something special. Yes, some of them did. They say, you have something special, but keep working.
Keep working.
But the rejections really hurt, very disheartening.
How did you keep going with rejections, and had you set a timeline for yourself that, okay, if I don't make it by X date, I'm going to do something else?
Well, I think what kept me going was the passion.
Passion,
Yes, I think I love to write, and I thought I'm going to write this story, and if nobody ever reads it, that's fine. But I'm going to write it and keep on trying to get an agent. And my plan was to stop trying end of 2014. 2014. Yeah, okay. So I started trying in 2011, and I said, okay, after 3 years, I'll say maybe nobody wants this story. And
but this didn't get published in 2014.
No, they got published. It took 2 years for it to come out.
So you kept going even after.
Well, after I was, so I got an agent in 2014, and then she sold it like very quickly after.
Oh, okay.
And then it took a few more edits to get.
So finally, you got an agent who said, "I like it."
Well, she said, this is good, it could be better, but I'm going to represent you, which was a very big step, because when you're coming from nowhere like I did, you don't have any connection, to have somebody who is a top agent. My agent also represents Jonathan Franzen.
Jonathan Franzen's agent.
Right.
Okay,
right.
What's your name?
Suzanne Golom.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne. So when I had this really big agent call me, which was probably the biggest thing that happened to me at that point, because I had been trying for almost 3 years, and finally I got a call from this woman saying, I think you have something special, I'm going to represent you. And then she represented me, and then I did more work on it, and then she sold it, and then I did more work again.
Well, you do have something special. You are a best-selling author on the New York Times and on the charts on Amazon, and we're so happy for you.
Thank you.
Cheering you on. May I just say, I wanted a different ending.
Okay.
I'm not telling what the ending is. I'm just saying I wanted a different ending, but it's a really, really good read, right up until the very end. We just disagree on how it should have ended.
Yes.
But it's a really good read.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, you can appreciate it?
Yes.
Okay. Just a comment from the Peanut Gallery. How many best-selling books have I written? None. So congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you, Gayle.
Thank you. High five.
Yeah.
CBSN, we'll be right back. Good book.